Welcome back, everyone, to Dungeon Brew. We are now going to do the deep dive into our world building series. We did our intro videos and talked about all the different elements that we are going to cover, and now we are going to talk about all of those in detail. Instead of kind of jumping all over the map, we decided to just focus on the general theme of Greece or Greek culture, and John and I are pretty excited to jump into this. So, John, why don't you kind of take us off in terms of some of your inspirations or things that you have seen that kind of driven you towards wanting to make campaigns around Greek culture or Greece itself. Here at Dungeon Brew, we are about to release our first large crowdfunding project on BackerKit. It is Thagum. It is a new campaign setting manual that gives you a grim, dark steampunk world. Over 200 plus pages. That's going to have new subclasses, new lineages, new weapons, gritty firearm mechanics, new feats, new monsters, city guides, and so much more. And we are looking for you just to go and follow the page right now and be ready for that launch. So follow the link, go check it out, and then come back to the video.
So I'm a bit of a history buff. I mean, I've seen some of the popular media when it comes to like the movie Troy and that type of thing, but what really captured me was there's actually a book, and I will post the link down below as to what book I'm referring to because I can't remember the name of it, but it goes through the different like time periods of Troy. Specifically in terms of like what the city actually looked like during the Trojan War. I've read books on Sparta, on Athens, and I know you've done the same. That type of stuff, like historical realism for me, is usually a big pull when it comes to talking about Greek history. And then you take that, especially when you're talking about like an RPG setting, and you meld that with the myth, with the Odyssey, the Iliad, other tales of various heroes, and you combine that all together, and you can end up with something that I think is really exciting in terms of a campaign setting when you're looking, especially when you're looking at building an entire world that is focused on that type of reality that the Greeks saw for both themselves and the world around them.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what my first introduction was to Greece, and it may have been probably reviewing, mythologies in grade school and looking at the Greek gods and that type of thing. Yeah. But in terms of like really diving into it in adulthood, the Odyssey and the Iliad were huge inspirational pieces for me. I have a whole stack of books in my closet behind me on the Peloponnesian War, the Spartans, their culture, their engagement with each other, and it actually details a lot on Athens as well and how that's put together. And then same thing, there's good things in popular media. There was actually Troy Fall of the City. That was a Netflix series that went on for a while. We've seen Clash of the Titans, and another type of videos that kind of capture that hero god complex that you see out of that culture. I mean, we grew up with Hercules and Xena and that type of stuff too, which is kind of a dramatized version of some of these ideals.
Right.
But it does capture that very exciting hero god mentality where you have like these demi-humans that are running around, or demigods that are running around, engaging with humans and in impacting or influencing their day-to-day lives.
So I guess since we're talking about that as the source of inspiration, the main thing, because we're going to cover a bunch of other aspects of this throughout this series, but when we're talking about inspiration, we're trying to capture something of the feel, of the look, something about one of those sources of inspiration, and bring it into the world that we're creating so that other people can experience it as well. So how do you do that in terms of creating a world that is ripe for storytelling? And maybe naming conventions or other things like that. Like, how can you get that story, and how can you get the world to tell the story or make it available for a story?
Yeah, you and I have talked about this in depth, and we've had to as we've done a lot of different projects with each other through the years. And I've noticed that I'm an individual that really likes to use that inspiration through the concept of storytelling, where you're very good at capturing it through mechanics. And I think that's kind of the two sides of the coin to really bring it to life in creating something homebrew around a particular idea, is having both a good story that you're telling and those mechanics that reflect the inspiration, so it stays alive throughout the entire course of gameplay. So for me, we're going to talk about all these different elements over the next many weeks in world building. And for me, I try to incorporate that inspiration throughout the course of each one of those elements, whether it's in the culture, it's in the religion, it's within the population, in terms of like city-states existing. It's there in the geography. You know, if you're on the sea and you're sailing and there's trade centers that are taking place, or the politics of the military, whatever it is, I'm looking at specific, in this case, Greek pieces that I can incorporate throughout the story to really bring that to life. And I enjoy doing that. It has to do with the language and just like you said, the naming conventions, and making sure that all of those things reflect back on that Greek culture. So you always feel like you're just completely immersed in that. But for you, like, I want to throw that question back at, because you're the expert in, I think, between the two of us, on how you capture that in mechanics. So what are some of the things that you do to bring that inspiration alive through the mechanics that you bring into the game?
Well, it really comes into the sources of inspiration. You know, if you're looking at historical accuracy, the movie depiction of Troy and Clash of the Titans, that's way and above and beyond in terms of like their building technology, for instance. If you look at the actual ruins of a lot of these locations, they're brought down quite a bit. So you would want to make sure that that's reflected not only in the way the world is perceived, but also in terms of things like they're in the Bronze Age. There isn't steel. There isn't really iron so much. You're dealing with copper, you're dealing with tin, you're dealing with bronze. So that means that everyone's on a level playing field, but it also means that if you have the notion, if you want to bring in some kind of magical race that is advanced, then the idea of iron or steel could be considered magical in a sense. This is above and beyond technology. You also want to look at things like the type of culture that allows for different things to be true, in the sense that most of the heroes in the world have some kind of divine heritage. It's the notion that Achilles, was dipped into the river Styx, I believe, and so only his ankle was vulnerable. You have heroes like Hercules, who is part divine. Those options for character building is something that I would look at definitely, to make sure that any player who comes and plays in this world, if they're going to be a hero, there's the possibility that they have some kind of divine heritage, or they have some kind of connection to the world that makes them heroic. They are recognized for that in some way. And then you also want to look at what was typical for, actual combat type stuff. So there's a lot of sea battles, a lot of naval type stuff, and to my recollection, there's not much in most editions of D&D that really focus a whole lot on the way that naval stuff works. So I would definitely want to think about building those things out. I want rules for how you sail the ship to make it interesting and engaging. I want rules for how naval combat works to make it interesting and engaging. I want those things to really come to life, because if the entire game is going to consist of rolling your navigator's tool check, and you're not going to have a whole lot, because I'm getting ahead of myself. You have your navigator tool check in terms of sailing around the ocean. Not very exciting. You have naval battles, which there was a lot of ramming with the triremes and that type of thing. So that could be a lot of fun from a player perspective of trying to line up the ship, and if you nail a really good hit, you deal a lot of damage to the enemy ship with your trireme. And then you also have like hand-to-hand combat, which was mostly shield and spear. That was considered the main way of doing it. Paris's bow and arrow was considered effeminate. It was considered non-honorable, non-glorious combat. So spear and shield was where it was at. Make sure those shields have an impact on gameplay. Everybody carries around multiple spears to be thrown, because that's the way combat was played, which sounds a little bit one-sided, but if you can build out the mechanics in that regard, make it so, Ajax's shield that's got 7 layers that's almost impossible to penetrate is a huge deal in that time period. All of those things, and I know that I'm listing off a ton of stuff, but there really is no limit to the options that you can have when trying to put together some mechanically interesting things that allow your inspiration to come to life within the world that you're creating.
No, I love all those examples, and even as you're listening through them, I'm thinking of all the ways that you can then incorporate those into the story as well.
Right.
You know, you're traveling around this large sea, the Mediterranean, and you have all these small islands that you're going to, like Cyprus, and you have these tales that are there about, you know, cyclops that are walking on the islands, and these dark places where there's witches at the top of mountains that are casting spells on people, and you have these shrines that are located all throughout the world that you have to go to and pay homage to for your gods in order to keep up this divine energy that is surging through you to appease them so that they don't then curse you and take away this divinity that's been given to you to have this demigod status as you're moving through as a hero. And, you know, minotaurs that are, I mean, all these things that I think that a lot of those aspects are in D&D, but I personally would have fun sitting down and building a specific Cyclops that is in this world that supersedes some of the things you might find in a monster manual, because it really brings that world to life, and it makes you feel as though you're walking through it.
Yeah, definitely. The idea of the Cyclops, there's one. There are not, you know, there's not a ton of these running around, and if you come across the Cyclops, that is a dangerous, you know, encounter. And speaking about what you were talking about a little bit with the number of islands, getting lost at sea was a huge thing in these myths. The idea that you would go out at sea, it was dangerous, you didn't always know when you were coming back, and being gone for years, or in Odysseus' case, like a decade, trying to return back home. And if you have the correct mechanical supports to make sea travel interesting and engaging, you have the right idea for a DM who's prepared with these random strange islands that you go to and you don't know exactly what's going to be there when you arrive, but you don't have a choice because you need food or water or whatever. Again, there's really no limit to what you can do when you start marrying the mechanics with the story together to make everything engaging trying to travel through this world.
Oh, this has been an excellent chat. I'm looking forward into diving into the next element as we explore it. But I think in summary, what we're saying is look at all the different elements that you have and find ways to incorporate that story and mechanics to keep that inspiration alive so your players feel like they are constantly in that world from your first campaign to your final battle in the last campaign.
Sure.
Dungeon Brew.